said, my name is Shannon LaCount. I'm a director in the Campus Success Division at Campus Labs, which is a software company that has a platform for all things related to institutional effectiveness and student success. And I'm always happy to answer questions if you have any. Campus Labs is a partner with the Idea Center, which is why I have this great opportunity to talk today about how teaching and learning can be impacted in the classroom. And I'm going to use my experiences as a faculty member and administrator at the University of Minnesota Duluth, as well as some research and work we do here at Campus Labs and stories of my, like I said, my own experiences and colleagues that I've worked with. Those of you who are familiar with the Idea Center, which probably are all of you because you're participating in a webinar with the Idea Center, are probably quite familiar with the concept of teaching and learning. When we talk about teaching and learning in the work I do, we're talking about a learner-centered approach to the learning experience. So it's as much about what the students do in the classroom and how the students perform in the classroom as it is what the teachers help to do to help the students succeed. We have a group, a community of practice at Campus Labs dedicated to teaching and learning, where we share our stories, put together resources and materials, and review the literature to make sure that we're helping campuses that we work with promote the positive teaching and learning experience as much as possible. And a lot of what we do comes from the scholarship of teaching and learning. So we're reading articles, we're reading books, we're sharing stories, and we're talking to member campuses about the assessment work they're doing and the work they're doing in the classroom to really enhance their own experiences as teachers and the students' experiences to make them as successful and learn as much as possible. And I can't have a doctorate in education with an emphasis on teaching and learning without promoting the scholarship of teaching and learning, because if we don't share the work we're doing and we don't share experiences that we're having, we can't spread that knowledge around. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about today comes from scholarship of teaching and learning and ways it has been presented in both conversations, committee groups, literature, and presentations at conferences. Another reason to think about this is when we think about student retention, there's often retention committees and big initiatives to make sure students stay on campus. But if you've had a chance to read Rethinking College Student Retention, they point out some of the biggest influencers that keep students on our campuses. That's academic advising, which can happen through faculty or professional advisors. And then the influence that we can have from the classroom is genuine faculty interest in the students and faculty organization, preparation, and clarity. And by making sure that we're conscious of this practice and knowing that we can impact whether or not a student stays on campus based on the things we do in the classroom is important for us to consider and make sure we have a role in the retention initiatives on campus. And a lot of the things I'm going to share today are related or intertwined with these factors and what influences retention. My presentation today. I want to start off by saying that when I'm talking about assessment, I'm talking about taking stock of what is. I'm not talking about grades, and I'm not talking about evaluation. Those are different. I'm really talking about taking stock of what the classroom is like, what we're doing in the classroom, and making decisions based on it. And I like to give a little metaphor, if you will, about what I mean when I say the difference between assessment and evaluation. You don't know me from a hole in the wall, but I can tell you that I may be able to cover the distance of a mile in 10 minutes. I might be a little sore the next day. I'll definitely be winded at the end of it, but I can run a mile in about 10 minutes, or let's pretend I can. Now, if I told you that I had an injury, I was recovering from an injury, and I hadn't been able to run, much less walk much less run for the past couple months, you'd be really impressed by my 10-minute mile, and you might say, that's fantastic. You get an A. If, however, I told you that I've been training for a while, I've been trying to qualify for the Boston Marathon, and I've been working really hard, and I'm up to an average pace of a 10-minute mile, you'd say, that is a great effort. Good job, citizen runner, but it doesn't necessarily qualify you for the Boston Marathon, so, that's a C. If I told you that when I was 16, I was a track star, I could run a 6-minute mile, and now I can barely get a 10-minute mile out, you might say, what the heck happened to you? You get an F. Either way, the assessment of how far I can cover a mile is 10 minutes. But the value of it and how we perceive it, the context we put around it matters. So when I'm talking today about the information we're taking in, it's really that true definition of assessment and thinking and just taking in the information that so we can make informed decisions around it. The other theme to the information I'm going to share today is that it's formative. We want students to succeed in the end. We want them to be successful in our classes, and we want them to learn the important skills and knowledge that we intend for them. And what we do along the way can help us change what we do in the classroom. So today, the items that I'm going to talk about are mostly formative with the summative intention that students will be successful in the end. The structure of this, of talking today, is based around 6 questions. These questions, we happen to have an instrument that we use at Campus Labs, but really these questions are part of the IDEA instrument. But you could ask these questions on a daily basis or a frequent basis and get information from students that would help you inform the teaching that you're doing. That helps you focus on strengths, or at least what the students that perceive how students perceive what you're doing well. It helps reflect on the feedback that we're getting from ourselves, really, in our reflection, and from the students, and make adjustments in the next class or the next unit, and really see improvement over time. And if you are close partners with IDEA, or you're on the IDEA website a lot, you'll see that they have pod notes, and some of the information I'm going to share today you'll also find repeated in the pod notes, or they are associated with certain IDEA items that are all about the things we can do to improve teaching and learning. The first one is students tend to do better when we display a personal interest in the students and their learning. But what does that really look like? If you've read any sort of any books, or specifically The Courage to Teach from Parker Palmer, you know that teachers are humans. We know that. We're teachers. Students are humans as well. And it is always a more comfortable environment when we can acknowledge that in each other and really have some empathy and some commitment, and show students that we know that they could be having a good day or a bad day, but it matters to us, and we really want to make sure that they're doing as well as they can so they can learn as easily as they can. And some tips from the literature we've been reading at Campus Labs, the study I've done, the experience I've had in classroom. Some are super simple. One of them is know your students' names. There are examples of how people do this at the beginning of the semester. For anywhere from taking a video, an example that has come through a recent listserv was someone who used it. It's great to have the cell phones that we have now, so we can take a video where we just go down a line or go in a circle and have each student look into the camera and say their name. And it's something we can refer back to. It's something that engages the classroom in a short and simple way. Or you could have conversations about name, what the origin of someone's name is, and have them explain the story behind it. But having an effort and not only learning the names, but showing the students that you're attempting to learn the names, because it matters that each one is an individual in the classroom, can go a long way towards building a relationship. Another tip, be available. We typically have to have office hours, but we want to make sure that we have office hours and we're available in the way that makes sense to the students. A lot of faculty members right now are using apps or Facebook or Skype or other methods to allow students to connect with them, especially if we have an online experience or an online component to our courses. But just being clear about how students can connect with you and contact you and ask you questions and just be involved in the teacher-learner relationship can go a long way, again, towards having students be successful in the classroom. Tip number 3 in this area is to solicit and respond to feedback. Now, this can be about learning in any given day, or it can be big picture. So you'll see in the examples on the screen, it might be as simple as saying, what's your muddiest point? We've all heard about these classroom quick assessment practices, where as students are leaving during the day, you say, what's the thing that's not clear, so that you can revisit it at the beginning of the next class. It lets students communicate either anonymously or in a more comfortable way if they're struggling with some area, and it lets you know what you need to cover again. You could also, instead of the muddiest point, what are your key takeaways, and see if students are expressing accurately what you intended for them to learn that day. That would be soliciting feedback on a daily basis and responding to it in the next day. You can also think more big picture. So having like a small group instructional diagnosis where you have a facilitator, a fellow colleague, or someone in the teaching learning center to come in at a mid-semester or multiple points in the semester and solicit feedback on how the class is going in general for students. Students feel heard, and it gives you valuable information into how things are going in your class so that you can adjust what you're doing. One last way to show that you're exhibiting personal interest in the students is to think about, old Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. Find out about what the students can do, what they can do unaided, what they're good at, and think about where it would go too far and they wouldn't be able to do without some sort of serious support. You want to stay in students' zone of proximal development. And an example from a professor I've worked with was an economics professor that taught an economics class that fit into the liberal education or general education program. And she would, at the beginning of every semester, ask students where they're at, both with their knowledge of economics, kind of a pre-assessment, but would also ask their major, find out what those students were focused on, and then used examples in her daily lectures or in her units or in her examples that matched, that she could connect to the students' major. And it really made them understand, gave them a connection, and it showed that she cared what they were doing after and outside her classroom, and it helped students connect with the content in the class. One of the other ways to engage students or make sure that we're doing as much as we can to help students learn is to help students find ways to answer their own questions. There are a lot of inquiry-based methods or different things that we can do in the classroom, like role-playing, debates, discussions. I'll use a bunch of examples, but it's about having students identify what they don't know and then answer their own questions. One of the warnings I will give you that I've experienced personally and I've read about all over the place is that we've all had the questions where the students just say, just tell me what I need to do, or did I get the right answer? And if you are having students be the teachers, if you will, or being the most active in the classroom, they're not used to that, especially first-year students. They may not be used to that from their classroom, and they may say things like, you're supposed to be the teacher, you're supposed to tell us what you're going to know. So being clear with students and explaining why you're having them answer their own questions, there's evidence to show that hard work in the initial learning period increases retention, and I always like to put the picture of the book that this is coming from so that you can go, I am a fan of all the books that I'm showing you today, but letting students know that if they're answering their own questions, it's going to stick for them and it's going to help them learn and make connections a little bit better. An example of this, is problem-based learning, where students learn about a subject in a group. They're solving open-ended questions, they're working together. Keep in mind that the instructor is not passive. We're not just sitting at a desk in the back of the room letting the students do the work while we do some grading for a different class. We are part of the group and we are part of helping solve that problem. And I have to tell you, this is my favorite slide to use in a, in a presentation, because one of the most thoughtful people involved in education is my little friend Spencer Hazelton, who's now a 4th grader. But when he was a 3rd grader, he told me that his favorite kind of learning is surprise learning, the kind of learning where he and the teacher get into a problem together and find out the solution and find out the answers and work together to learn more. If a 3rd grader can recognize the value of that, we certainly should be able to. So that's my shout out to Spencer, and I will use this slide until the end of time. Another way of helping students answer their own question or really feel empowered by the work they're doing is to think pre-post assessment. So there is a professor I've worked with at Weber State University who uses concept maps throughout the semester. He asks, I believe it's a social science course, where he asks students to map out in a concept map social structures based around a certain problem. And as the semester goes on, he uses the same map and has them build upon it and edit it. Not only does that show them, is it assessment for his sake to see that students are actually learning and growing and developing more complex thoughts, it shows the students that they're changing. And there's it's pretty motivating to see that you're learning something and to learn and to see how different you are from the beginning to the end of a semester. That goes a long way towards helping students answer their own questions and just have a positive experience with the class. One more example from a member campus that I've worked with, Humboldt State University, in guiding discussions to help students answer their own questions. So not just asking straight up yes, no questions or fact-based questions, but if you want them to, asking them to explain or give an example, have an analogy, and really make them think more complexly about the content or the concepts that you're covering in your classroom. Another book I'm a huge fan of is talking about different ways to get students to use metacognition and reflection in their everyday work in the classroom. There are a lot of programs, there are a lot of campuses out there that have a goal of lifelong learning, and that's tough to measure and it's tough to define. I think metacognition, evidence that students can think about how they're learning and think about how they're thinking and reflect on what they've done, is the best example of lifelong learning. And there's a lot of proof to show that it increases engagement. It's very, very motivating, and it gives students that agency to approach problems on their own, and they'll have the skills once they leave your classroom to continue to think in a meaningful way. Question number 3, did the faculty member demonstrate the importance and significance of the subject matter? And this one is obvious. The thing that motivates learners most is the usefulness or potential for impacting others. Sharing scenarios, to me, the best way of showing the usefulness of the content matter is to share your stories. We are the discipline experts in the room. We're the ones who've had the life experience and the professional experience and the discipline experience. Tell our stories. They understand the content. They can make connections so much better when they can put it in the context of a story, and it's just interesting to hear it that way. If you don't have your own stories, think about use drama, use humor, demonstration, all of the examples you see here on the slide. And I'll tell you, if you're not comfortable doing that, Google how to give a TED Talk, and there will be a million different tips on how to tell a really good and really meaningful story in a way that connects with the students and helps them connect to the content. Another tip, this comes from a writing professor at the University of Minnesota Duluth, who I know quite well, who teaches both freshman composition and advanced writing for engineering majors who aren't super, super excited about learning how to write or thinking they have to write a lot. One of his first assignments that he has for students is to ask a professional about the types of writing that they do in their discipline. Poor thing had a student once where she wanted to be a speech pathologist and told him that one of the reasons she wanted to be a speech pathologist is there's no writing required in the discipline. And he said, well, I'd like you to meet my wife, the speech pathologist who knows exactly how much writing goes into the discipline. And she learned a few things quickly. But he asked them to ask about the prevalence of writing, the types of the genre, how often they have to do it, what sort of preparation, and to be very specific in asking them for tips on how to be a good writer in the discipline. And the students approach the classroom with a lot more energy and a lot more seriousness, and they understand why they're taking the class because it's been made significant based on the discipline. In this same book that I recommended before, there's examples of how some engineering programs connected or showed the significance of the subject matter by explaining the outcome. There's an ABET, the accreditors for engineering, have an outcome about teamwork. And sometimes that can be called a squishy or a soft outcome in the engineering world. But these programs, the ones that are highlighted in this book, explain to students who may not think teamwork is that important, that bonuses go to teams. They motivated them through money. You can be as smart as you want on your own, but if you can't work in a team, your team is not going to succeed and get a bonus. And that motivates students to work a little bit more on their teamwork activities in the classroom. One more way to help students or increase the significance of the subject matter is to give students some freedom. Hey, it's a quote from the Idea Center, so it's pretty relevant here. But there are different ways to give students a little bit of agency in this. So you might have a key question and ask them to select a topic that fits their interest. You could let them choose the delivery method. Not everything has to be in writing, or not everything has to be a video or an equation. You can help them answer a problem in the way that makes sense for them. If you need, for whatever reason, to control it a little bit more but still want to give students the choices, you could ask them to select from a menu. I often use this in my classroom, where I would have specific case studies in the world of speech pathology, so they could choose the area that was most interesting to them but still got at the same points I was trying to make in the classroom. And then if you're feeling, if you're ready for it and you want to work with the students, even if it's just a low stakes assessment, to create an assignment together to really get them to see why you're asking them to do what you're asking them to do. That can increase the significance as well. Another big thing in helping students learn is making clear how each topic fits into the course. So now it's not necessarily the discipline, but really how things are connected in the course. And it's not just, I can forget about this subject matter once I've taken the test and move on. And this goes back to that slide I told you on impact on retention, that the more clear and organized we are as instructors and as teachers, the more likely students are to learn, and the more they learn, the more they stay on campus, and the more comfortable they are on campus. So that's clarity and preparation is a big deal. To me, this also tells students why we're doing something. Why are you taking this class? Not just because it's on a list of general education courses I need to take so I can check them off. Why are we doing this assignment? Not just because you told me to, but because it fits into a bigger picture. I also see asking the question why not only as an explanation to the students, but as a reflection for ourselves. If we can't answer why we're asking students to do certain things, then perhaps it doesn't belong in the course anymore. Maybe it can be changed to have a better impact on what students are learning and have more connection into what's going on in that classroom. Some activities that you can do to help students see how things are connected in the course. An example, again, from this book I keep referencing, is exam wrappers. So asking students to, after their first exam, reflect on how they prepared for it, how they felt like while they were taking it, and what they would do differently in preparation for the next one. So that it's a metacognitive activity to see how they're approaching their learning, but it also lets them know that what they just covered is not something they can forget. It's really connected to the next units they're going to do. And they have examples in this book that are easily repeatable and have all the requirements that a busy faculty member would need. And it's not limited to exams. You can use these on projects. You can use them around lectures. There's a number of ways you can use exam wrappers, but it's a great way to help students see those connections in class. Another way, if you just want to engage students, group work, 1-minute papers, distributed and frequent testing. So if you are going to use daily or weekly quizzes, I recommend making them low stakes. Don't make them, I wouldn't say you want them to be punitive. You don't want students to have some sort of test anxiety that affects what they're doing. You just really want to have show them how the topics overlap and how subjects keep coming up and how everything is, it's really a big system and not just a series of disconnected activities that you're doing in your class. A big thing that students like to see is that the course material is explained clearly and concisely. Another quote from the Idea Center, my favorite word, understandableness. It seems like a ridiculous word, but it is perfect for the situation. If students can't understand what is being explained to them, they're not going to be able to learn it. And we don't want them to panic and stop listening to the things that they could understand if they've had a hard time with what we've presented so far. So this is where those formative assessment, those check-ins to see if students are taking it in, can be really powerful and help us back up or slow down if the students need it. One thing to think, or a couple of tips here. It helps them prepare for what's next. If you're super clear about how things are connected, help them understand how in our discipline, the epistemology of our discipline, like how do we understand what we understand? It's very different in the arts than it would be in the, in the health professions. So we want them to get to think in a disciplinary way. You can provide reviews and summaries and just show any sort of links or connections to help clarify what the material and the intention of the course is. Finally, we want to be stimulating. We want our ideas to be exciting, even if they don't seem like they should be. In What the Best College Teachers Do, we know that asking provocative questions is good. Discussion is a huge part of or a great way of getting students engaged in the classroom, getting some insight into how they communicate and how they're understanding, because you can observe the discussions. You can encourage critical thinking through asking specific questions, and you can also leave students with additional questions, which will, give them that opportunity to conduct some of that lifelong learning and metacognitive skills that we're hopefully helping them with. Active learning is not a phrase that we haven't heard. Active learning pops up all over the place, but it's true. Active learning can be as simple as taking notes or having some sort of guided document so that they're adding notes to supplement what you've already provided for them. Or it can be problem-based learning out in the community. It can be what we might picture as the ultimate active learning, but really getting students involved in the content and involved in the activities of the classroom helps them a lot in their learning. As this I've enjoyed this quote in reading the teaching and learning literature, that the one who does the work is the one who does the learning. And it's true. That's why we want students to be active in what they're doing, because they're going to be able to make connections. And that can happen through discussion, some other suggestions, as you can see on the slide, that putting posters together or presentations. Pachakcha, if you aren't familiar with that, is a way of giving presentations where you have 20 slides and you speak for 20 seconds on each slide. It really gets you moving through, and you have to have a clear message and good conceptual understanding to do that. It's a motivating activity to do, or have them do short TED Talks, illustrations, anything to really get them displaying their learning. This is a book that just came out recently about discussion in the college classroom, and I've really enjoyed it. There are a few things to take away about how you can increase discussion in the classroom, both the value of it and how you can promote it, how you can work with students who maybe talk too much or who don't talk enough. The biggest takeaway, you can read what my slide has here, but the biggest takeaway is to really be clear about expectations. Explain that discussion is valued, why it's valued, and how it's going to happen. You want to model what it looks like, and if it gets into a discussion about difficult or complicated subject matter, you want to model that it's either debate or expressing one's opinion, but not necessarily aggression. So you want students to feel safe having discussions in the classroom, but you want to explain that, or model that it's a deep discussion, and that you're really dealing with problem solving and critical thinking and communication skills, and you need to be explicit about it. You really need to explain how much you value it in your classroom and what the expectations are. Some final ideas of stimulating students is think, pair, share. You probably use some of these in your classroom, where people generate their own individual response. They share it with someone, or pair up with someone, and take it to another level, and then share it to the big classroom. Short written exercises can sometimes be used in conjunction with discussions to help those quieter people get their thoughts together before the discussion actually happens. Some other things to think about if you're using learning groups or learning cells. So one is kind of short-term and one is long-term. And there's evidence to suggest that if you're putting short-term groups together, like just saying get together for the day, that they're usually more successful if they're student selected, or students enter into their own groups. But if you're thinking long-term, there tends to be more even learning and more success when it is instructor selected, if there's going to be a group that's going to be working together long term throughout the whole semester. And then, I come from a medical model of you learn a concept, you practice the concept, and then you teach the concept. That goes into both self-reflection and self-evaluation and peer evaluation, that we tend to concentrate a little bit more on our performance if we know we have to share it with someone else, or if our peers are going to be assessing us as well. So those can be very motivating and stimulating and ultimately successful in the classroom. And wouldn't you know it, I am right on time. We have 30 minutes. I apologize if I talked a little too quickly, but I think Jake is going to open it up for questions if you all have them.
Thank you, Shannon. That was wonderful, and you covered a lot of great ground in a very short amount of time, so thank you so much for that. I have not seen any questions come in through the chat box, but feel free now to do that, to go ahead and take a minute if you have some questions for Shannon. One of the things I wanted to point out, and you did a really good job on this as well, Shannon, is how in the idea system, these are all teaching methods that are that there's data that's coming back to people via the idea system. And so here are some practical suggestions on, okay, what would I do differently if I want to emphasize one teaching method more, or if I want to strengthen how I'm approaching a teaching method. So thank you for this resource. I really appreciate having it, and it's been recorded, so we'll be able to push that out to people. So thank you again very much.
Because it's being recorded, I'll make sure I display the reference and resources slides as well, so people can refer to them, because I really do recommend all of the resources that I referenced here.
Yeah, those are excellent resources. I'm not seeing any questions here. Well, here comes a question. How can you hold students accountable to each other during group discussions other than grading each other?
Right. Well, I don't want to speak for the author of the book I referenced. I'll go back to it. There's a whole chapter actually in that book talking about whether to make discussion part of the grade or make it for points. Again, it's being explicit and setting clear expectations and modeling what it looks like. There's also ways of contributing to a discussion or group work that doesn't necessarily mean someone someone talking. Like there can be someone who puts together the group ideas and puts them on paper and hands in what the group came up with together. Because maybe oral communication isn't a huge strength for them, or they're not as comfortable with it. So having some sort of, I guess I gave a long answer, but having some sort of summary that's created by the group and being very explicit on the expectations, and also posing questions that are meaningful, having problems and having questions that actually make the students want to talk about it is motivating as well. I don't know if I love my answer, but that's as good as it's going to get on this Wednesday afternoon.
Yeah, thank you. And that was a good question. Thank you, June, for posting that one. I guess just one follow-up question here. In terms of, I mean, if for people who haven't implemented these in their classroom, or they may not be familiar with them, things like think, pair, share, those kinds of things, I think that we can approach it with the mentality as an instructor. I've got enough to do as it is. I'm trying to get as much information out and into the session. I mean, can you give an approximate, time to implement maybe one or two of these things? I mean, how onerous is it to adopt some of the things that you've shared with us today?
Well, obviously, if you're going to talk about something like problem-based learning, where you really have to craft a problem that is going to is going to address all of the outcomes of your course and what your intention for students to learn is, that's going to take some preparation ahead of time, and that's something that you probably shouldn't try to do in the middle of the semester. But if you want to have like a think, pair, share activity, that requires very little preparation. If you have a lecture planned for the day and there's a I don't know, news article or piece of literature that addresses the concept that you were intending to talk about anyway, taking a few minutes at the beginning of the class and posing a question that students can respond to. Think, pair, share can be pretty quick. Like, take 1 to 3 minutes, write down your thoughts, turn to your neighbor and share it with in the next 3 minutes, and then let's come together and see what themes we have as a group. We're talking, 5 to 20 minutes depending on the size of the class, and that can really be a last minute. I don't recommend anything being last minute, but it could be a thing that you add to your class and really doesn't take a ton of preparation or take a ton of time away from your class. So it can run the gamut. It can be a big project that you need to have as part of your course prep ahead of time, or it can be something that you incorporate into your classroom just because you want to try and see how interactive your students are.
Yeah, thank you. And maybe as you're trying to shift that mentality for the students on what their role is in the learning process, as opposed to being, I'm just here to receive information,
right,
becoming participants, think, pair, share might be a way to kind of, dip their toes in the water and set expectations for what might be coming later on in the course or in the semester.
Another super quick thing are, we hear you can't read an article around teaching and learning that doesn't mention, or especially assessment that doesn't mention a 1-minute paper. But a quick check-in at the end. If you have a student response system or a clicker system where you can ask a simple question at the beginning or the end of a course, for you to use that information, not as part of their grade or as points, but really to have the information about how are students responding to this question, you can save yourself a lot of time. If everybody's got the concept and you were intending to review it for the first 20 minutes of your next class session, you just saved yourself 20 minutes because you've shown yourself that that students have that concept and you can move on. So sometimes just spending a few minutes can save you time in the long run.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't see any other questions coming in, but again, Shannon, thank you for your time. I really enjoyed the content, the information that you shared with us and the way you did it. So thank you again so much.
Hey, this was a blast. Thank you, everybody. Feel free to contact me if you want to, and I'm sure I'll talk to you soon, Jake.
All right, yep. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, and thank you, Shannon.